velvet rope wasn't just a barrier, it was a proclamation. In the heart of Harlem, on a street pulsing with black life and creativity, it declared a brutal, simple truth. This world was not for you. This is the story of the night that rope was cut, not with a knife, but with a strategy so meticulous and relentless, it changed the rules of power itself. It begins with one man, an insult, and a walk into the shadows that would ignite a quiet revolution. Harlem in 1935 was a paradox of explosive energy and entrenched constraint. The Great Migration had filled its streets with a new black metropolis, a cultural renaissance that was redefining American art, music, and literature. The air thrummed with the genius of Duke Ellington's orchestra, the poetry of Langston Hughes, and the vibrant paintings of Aaron Douglas. Yet, this black Mecca existed within a white framework of control. Much of the property was owned by absentee white landlords. The police force was largely white and hostile, and crucially, some of the most lucrative institutions built on black talent enforced a rigid, humiliating color line. The Cotton Club stood as the gleaming symbol of this contradiction. Nestled on West 142nd Street, its very name was synonymous with glamour, jazz, and forbidden excitement for wealthy downtown whites. They would flock uptown in their limousines, seeking an authentic and exotic experience. What they found was a meticulously staged fantasy, the most brilliant black musicians in the world, like Ellington and Cab Calloway, performing on a stage shaped like a southern plantation veranda. The dancers were tall, light-skinned, and uniform. The waitstaff was impeccably dressed and silently efficient. The entire production was designed to make white patrons feel safely adventurous. The one element forbidden in this carefully constructed jungle, other black faces in the audience. The policy was ironclad. Black people could create the magic and serve it, but they could never share in it as patrons. The club was a fortress of extraction, drawing its lifeblood from the community that surrounded it while locking its doors against them. Into this charged landscape walked Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson on a cool September evening. To describe Johnson merely as a gangster is to misunderstand the man and the moment. He was a complex figure, a product of the brutal limitations of his time, who had built a formidable empire within the only economies largely available to ambitious black men: policy banking, the numbers racket, and other illicit ventures. He was feared, certainly, but also served as a kind of shadow governor in Harlem. He provided loans when banks wouldn't, offered protection from predatory white gangsters like Dutch Schultz, and commanded a loyalty born from a recognition that he, for all his violence, operated within the community, not purely against it. He was dressed not for a raid, but for a negotiation, in a suit that spoke of success and a quiet, formidable confidence. He had been invited by a Jewish businessman, Jacob Weinstein, who believed that in the shadowy world of Harlem commerce, an exception could be made for a man of Johnson's stature. It was a profound miscalculation. The Cotton Club's racism was not personal, it was systemic and absolute. It did not see a powerful individual, it saw only a category to be excluded. The doorman, Thomas Murphy, was the system's gatekeeper. His job was pattern recognition, and the pattern was simple. He placed his body in the doorway, a wall of official disdain. "You can't come in here," he announced, his voice projecting for the benefit of the waiting white clientele. "This place isn't for your kind. Go back where you belong." The phrase "your kind" reduced Johnson, his power, his intelligence, his tailored suit, to a single despised characteristic. Go back where you belong was the true spark. He was where he belonged. This was Harlem. The club sat on Harlem stone, hired Harlem hands, and sold Harlem soul. In that frozen moment, Johnson faced a choice that defined centuries of black response to insult. He could erupt in violent rage, a justified, understandable reaction that would result in his arrest or death, becoming just another uppity Negro story for the white patrons to recount. He could plead or argue, debasing himself before a man who held no real authority beyond a borrowed prejudice. Or he could do something far more calculated. He chose the third path. A cold, lifeless smile touched his lips, not a sign of amusement, but a marker, a mental photograph being taken. He held Murphy's gaze just long enough for a flicker of uncertainty to cross the doorman's face, then nodded once. The nod said nothing of acceptance. It was an acknowledgement of receipt, message received and logged. Then he turned and walked away, his posture erect, his pace deliberate. He absorbed the humiliation without letting it break his stride, carrying it with him not as a wound, but as intelligence. For the next hour, Johnson walked. He moved through the vibrant arteries of Harlem, past the Savoy Ballroom where couples of all colors danced the Lindy Hop on an integrated floor, past storefront churches and bustling cafes. The contrast was a living indictment. The energy here was organic, shared, communal. The energy he'd been denied at the Cotton Club was a performance for outsiders. His anger, white-hot at the door, began a slow, dangerous alchemy. It transformed from a personal desire for revenge into a cold, strategic analysis. The question shifted from, how do I hurt that doorman, to how do I dismantle the machine that empowered him? He saw the Cotton Club not as an impregnable fortress, but as a vulnerable organism. Its vitality was entirely parasitic. It needed Harlem's musicians, its workers, its location, its cultural cachet. Without these, it was just an empty room downtown. Its owners assumed this dependence was a one-way street, that Harlem had no choice but to supply these resources. Johnson's genius was in realizing that dependence could be weaponized. If every resource could be made less reliable, more expensive, or publicly toxic, the economic equation of discrimination would collapse. It wasn't about morality, it was about cost-benefit analysis. He would make racism bad for business. That night the phone calls began. This was not a summoning of hitmen. This was the assembly of a shadow cabinet. First, Theodore Teddy Green, his attorney, the bridge to the world of contracts, laws, and legitimate grievance. Second, Stephanie St. Clair, the formidable queen of policy, a financial power who controlled a vast segment of Harlem's underground economy and understood leverage. Third, Adam Clayton Powell SR, the towering minister of the Abyssinian Baptist Church, who commanded the moral authority of thousands. Johnson was building a coalition that represented every facet of black power in Harlem, the illicit, the financial, the spiritual, and the legal. The meeting in the back room of a 133rd Street speakeasy was a historic convergence. The air was thick with cigar smoke and a sense of unprecedented possibility. Gangsters in sharp suits sat across from union organizers in work shirts. Church deacons listened intently to policy bankers. Johnson, speaking in his characteristically soft voice that forced the room to lean in, laid out the blueprint. He recounted the insult not to elicit sympathy, but to present a case study in systemic failure. They built a kingdom on our land, he said, his eyes moving from face to face. They use our bricks, our music, our sweat to build their walls, and then they tell us we're not fit to walk through their gate. They believe their walls are too high. I'm here to tell you we don't need to tear them down. We just need to stop giving them bricks. The plan, dubbed the siege by those in the room, was a masterpiece of asymmetric warfare. It had multiple, simultaneous fronts, each designed to stress a different weakness in the Cotton Club's operations. Front 1, the talent. Duke Ellington was more than a performer, he was the brand. Johnson and Sunt Clough facilitated discreet offers from the newly integrated Savoy and other venues, giving Ellington the financial backing to make an impossible demand of the Cotton Club, a 50% pay raise and dignified treatment for his band. When management balked, citing his contract, Ellington for the first time had a credible alternative. The threat of losing their headline act wasn't just an artistic loss, it was a catastrophic commercial blow. Front 2, the Lubk. Every waiter, busboy, cook, and cleaner was a potential agent of subtle resistance. Through union connections and community networks, a quiet directive spread: slow the machine. Waiters became masters of misdirection, orders took wrong turns, drinks arrived after the song meant to accompany them had finished. Kitchen staff unerred food safety to an almost absurd degree, slowing output to a crawl. These weren't farbed offenses, but collectively, they eroded the seamless, luxurious experience white patrons paid for. The service became slightly sour, the atmosphere faintly strained. Front 3, the supply chain. The club required a constant stream of luxury goods, prime cut steak, imported champagne, fine linens. Sunt Clough and Johnson's networks reached deep into the wholesale and distribution channels that served all of Harlem's businesses. Suppliers received a polite, firm choice: divert your business from the Cotton Club or risk having your entire Harlem clientele, a far larger market, dry up overnight. Soon, deliveries became mysteriously unreliable. Trucks broke down, ice didn't arrive for the champagne. The club was forced into the spot market, paying exorbitant prices for basic goods. Front 4, the regulatory environment. Through Green's legal manavkung and the coalition's political whispers, the club found itself suddenly under microscope. Health department inspectors, long indifferent, discovered critical violations in the pristine kitchen. Fire marshals demanded expensive new exit installations. The Liquor License Authority launched a routine review that stretched into weeks of uncertainty. Each compliance issue was a financial drain and a management headache, sapping attention and resources. Front 5, the social license. This was Paul's domain. From his pulpit, he named the sin. The Cotton Club's policy became a subject of Sunday sermons, community meetings, and growing public scorn. He framed it not as entertainment, but as theft and humiliation. This campaign didn't aim to shame the white patrons, they were largely shameless, but to unite and galvanize Harlem itself, and to strip the club of any pretense of being a neutral business. It was now a public moral problem. For Anna Madden, the white gangster who owned the club, the world was unraveling in inexplicable ways. Profits plummeted as costs soared and customer satisfaction doubled. His star was threatening to defect. His supplies were choked. City Hall, once comfortably greased, was now a source of constant nuisance. When his underworld contacts finally whispered the name Bumpy Johnson, his initial rage turned to cold frustration. He could, of course, order a hit. But his advisors were clear. Starting a war with Johnson in Harlem would be like trying to drain the ocean. Johnson was embedded, protected, and had just demonstrated an alarming capacity for organized, nonviolent pressure. More importantly, killing Johnson wouldn't stop the siege. It would martyr him and escalate it. The coalition, now aware of its own power, would continue. Cornered, Madden agreed to meet Thada Green. The negotiation in Green's office was the formal surrender. Green was calm, precise. The operational difficulties are a coordinated response to your policy, he explained. They will continue and intensify until the policy changes. Madden, the tough bootlegger, was defeated not by a stronger gangster, but by a smarter system. He had been utmanavku in his own game of leverage. On October 15, 1935, a terse announcement crossed the wires. The Cotton Club would henceforth welcome all patrons, regardless of race. Harlem was skeptical. Promises were cheap. The proof came on the night of the 18th, when a delegation from the coalition, black doctors, lawyers, teachers, and ministers, approached the door. Thomas Murphy, the same doorman, met their eyes. The system he served had recalibrated. He uncluppered the velvet rope and stepped aside. They entered, were shown to a prime table, and were served with the same aloof efficiency as any other guest. They sat and listened to Duke Ellington play, sophisticated lady, not as hired help creating umbunts for others, but as an audience, as equals. The music, for the first time in that room, was truly for them. The integration of the Cotton Club was more than a social victory. It was a profound tactical lesson. It proved that economic power, when collectively harnessed and strategically applied, could achieve what moral appeals alone could not. It could force a recalculation of the bottom line. Johnson's coalition did not stop there. They turned their model on other discriminatory establishments, a silent wave of integration propelled not by protests at the door, but by pressure on the ledgers. Man who told Bumpy Johnson, "Go back where you belong," inadvertently handed him a blueprint. Johnson went back all right. He went back to the heart of Harlem and mobilized it. He demonstrated that belonging isn't granted by those who guard the gates. It is claimed by those who realize they hold the keys to the kingdom's survival. His revenge was not a moment of violent catharsis, but a permanent shift in the landscape. It was a masterclass in turning humiliation into leverage, and in understanding that the most powerful walls are often the ones we stop building for our oppressors. The story of that night is a testament to a different kind of strength, the strength of patience, the power of the collective, and the world-changing force of a brilliantly executed plan.